we're talking about how each of the generations has significance, and we have brought the discussion back to a little bit earlier on when we were discussing each of the families that came out of each of the sons, and how both the influence of their progenitor affected their life, but also their geography and resources influenced their lives. So it comes back to both the nature and nurture argument, that part of this is truly environmental. If you live by the sea, you're going to be a fisherman, and if you live inland, you're not going to know what the taste of fish is unless you trade for it. So you might want to become somebody who trades so that you can share in that. And in order to become a trader, you need to be somebody who's more affable. In order to become a fisherman, you need to be somebody who's more tough and more able to weather things. So you might not need to learn that skill. So part of it is somebody who tells you, go out there and do that. And then in doing that, you do become different, both because of being told to go out and do that, but also because of the way that you're going to have to run your life because of where you are. So people differentiate both on the initial ideology, but also on geography and resources and who your neighbors are and whether they're friendly, whether they're not friendly, what your role has to be in the unique position that you are. And we believe in terms of Jews that we have this private supervision, that God looks after each of our moment-to-moment interactions and put us there for a reason. And in terms of the nations, there's a debate as to whether they have that private supervision or whether they just have a national supervision. Nonetheless, they are there to be part of the influence that is given to us in order for us to be able to realize that all the things that are put in front of us are put there for a reason, and put there to create moments for us in which we have to use our ability to decide and our ability to influence to make the moment what it could be. We are on page 139, and we should note that up until now, when we've talked about each of the sons who are the continuing generation, so Vayechi Shem is with a Rebi'i, the Arpachshad Chai, a Zakef Katon, a Menachem and a Katon, V'Shelach Chai, Merchat Tipcha. So we're going with, again, different note combinations, and we have another one here, Vayechi Ever with a Zakef Gadol, and again it might be a little blurry there, but this is the line with the two dots beside it. So if you want to correct it in your text, we're on page 139, Genesis 11, verse 16. So this is a three-part note. So we're going to expect a lot of different influences on what's going to happen here. And he lived Ever, number one, having retained views which were indoctrinated and transferred by his father, and he lived Ever accordingly, adding also an attitude of heavenly control over the facts on earth, as indicated by the shape of the reading mark. So here we're going to see somebody who has multiple influences: his own idea, his own individuality, the things that were given to him from his father, and this heavenly influence that he sees pervading the world. And again, when we looked at that chart, we realized that Noach and Shem and all of these people are still alive there. So he still has the ability to tap into those things, even though his father is trying to sort of redefine reality a little bit. So he's got some of that in him, and he's got some of the original influence in him, and some of what he's created by himself. So we get that three-part note to tell us that all of those things are in him. Arba, 4 with a mercha, which is lightly connected to what's come from before, but mostly moving forward into what's going to go on. His idea that all 4 corners of heaven and earth are simultaneously under the jurisdiction of one God was the guiding motive of his life, as shown by the directional shape of the related reading mark. So again, we're taking the significant number. So we took shalosh in the last pasuk to 11:15, number 5, the word 3. We sort of are taking these small numbers and we're doing like we do at the Seder. Who knows 1? Who knows 2? Who knows 3? We're taking that number and trying to read significance into it, perhaps beyond what the number in and of itself means. And again, this is something that can only have a relevance in a parish that is taking each word with a note and giving it a significance. So you're not going to find anybody else taking the word arba, 4, from the phrase 400 and doing something with it. So you have to realize the uniqueness of what we're doing here by taking that word 4 and saying it relates to the 4 corners of heaven and earth, and therefore it has to do with the influence of the divine on the natural, on the mundane, and to draw that influence down just from the mercha under the word arba, 4. Again, quite an insight that you would not find anywhere else. Ushloshim and 30 with a tipcha. This is going to close the thought and have a slight pause after it. Number 3. However, within his ideological concepts and abstracts, his practical life and personal duties were not ignored. After reaching an age of 4 and 30 years, as stressed by the closing shape of the directional reading mark. So while he is thinking about things that are abstract and beyond earthly, he manages to bring himself back to his responsibilities in the physical, and brings those concepts down into what he's going to do in the future. Shana, year. He considered each year of living to be an asset and was to be utilized advantageously, as noted by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. This has the stabilizing at Nachta. And here, what we're seeing is he's not piling on year upon year of personal achievement or year upon year of developing his own thought. He's piling upon year. He's saying that each year is time that is given to him in order to continue to be an influence, and he is using each moment that he's given as an asset, as something that he can do something with. Vayoled, again with that tipcha, this is going to bring us back to everything and fold in everything that's happened from before, and then slightly pause afterwards. He followed. So again, look back to 11:14, that same Vayoled with the tipcha. So we're doing the same thing here. Everything that we said in the first half of the sentence is going to be rolled into number 5. He followed those aspects of orientation, and he produced a male offspring to carry his ideology, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So he is going to fold all of those things that he has tried to bring into the world and try to use all of his time to grow. And he's going to give them to Et Peleg, to the stabilizing Sof Pasuk, Et Peleg, expecting future success with Peleg, the name given to the child. Aver prophetically expressed an event during its lifetime by his name, Dor Haflaga, which signified an era. So he calls his son division. The question is, how did he know that during his son's life the Tower of Babel was going to happen, the world was going to be divided? So we infer here by the name that there is an aspect of prophecy here, that even when the child is born, he realizes that during his lifetime this is something that's going to happen. And he calls him Peleg because he has a vision that this is what's going to happen. So I'm not sure why he calls this a future success. Expecting future success with Peleg, the name given to the child. So again, I don't know where he derives that other than from the concept that a sof pasuk is a stabilizing note.
Maybe he misused the term, and rather than meaning success, he was trying to give him a bracha that he should be successful in this era of Peleg, in this era of separation, that he should find a way to overcome the challenges that come with it, to find a way to succeed in this fracturing environment. So he's giving a blessing for success, perhaps.
It doesn't say who gave him the name.
Sorry?
It doesn't say who named him. Does it?
It doesn't, but it's assumed. It's assumed at each generation that the father is the one who's naming the son.
Not necessarily true. Right? And that's the passive, right? The explanation is passive.
Agreed, and we've also already stated before that while a name is what we call the character when we read Tanakh, names are often descriptive of a characteristic and not necessarily the name by which that person went by.
Interesting name.
In any case, it will come to me. He had many names.
Yitro.
So Yitro and Yeter are mentioned, but all the other 5 names that he went by aren't. So again, names signify a characteristic, and don't necessarily signify the name that the person went by. Which again, why would you name your child Donkey? Agreed. Nonetheless, this is the pshat. So the pshat is always defined by the text and notes. So we see that at least on some level, that is what the person is. And then we have to realize that there is drash and remez and sod up above that perhaps defines further characteristics and might in fact define the person's real name, but that's not so important because we want to deal with the simple fact of that's who that's who he lived his life as the one who was there during the generation of division. So we're going to notice that the Zakef Gadol makes the word Aver again stand out and gives him importance. So we are giving him importance in that this is a generation where we see that diversion of thought away from the original concept of recognizing heaven start to come back. So it went away perhaps with Shelach, but it's coming back with Aver, so that's why he gets a note that trumpets his name a little bit more. And 4 and 30 stands away from Shana, what he's using each word for, and Vayoled, and he produced, is standing separate from Peleg to what Peleg becomes. Vayechi Ever Arba Ushloshim Shana Vayoled et Peleg. We are on page 140, verse 11-17.
Sorry, how do we do at the top?
10 minutes or 15 max.
So we're going to do this sentence and then we're going to stop.
Yeah.
Vayechi Ever. Again, now we've come back to the Rivi'i, so this is the note that's going to let that name stand by itself. and give it importance. Aver's main purpose of life was to reproduce and establish continuity. And he lived Aver by an unchangeable pattern with regard to his original principles, as indicated by the shape of the reading mark and by the identical expression of the previous sentence. So you will notice Vishelach. So we're looking at sentence 11:14. Vishelach chai, and the next sentence Vayechi Shelach. We'll go back another one before that. V'ar Parshad chai Vayechi Arpachshad. We're going to go back one before that. Vayechi Shem. So each one of them before is having a different note combination in the first sentence, or a different word combination in the first sentence from the second sentence. V'ar Parshad chai Vayechi Arpachshad. But with Peleg, we're seeing Vayechi Peleg, and then we're with Aver.
Right.
With Aver, Vayechi Aver, and then the next sentence again, Vayechi Aver. The exact same words appearing twice in a row in two different sentences. So that's saying that what he thought originally, the way that he designed himself to be an influencer originally, is what's going to continue. So that's why we're saying the unchangeable pattern. Vayechi Aver, Vayechi Aver. The way that he started originally is the way that he stayed. And we have an additional thought on this word, NB. The identical beginnings of the previous sentence duplicates the name and is comparable in meaning to an adjacent repetition of that name. So, so Avraham, or so we say that is something that only happens with people of importance. So that gives Aver a semblance of importance by having that same word grouping appear two sentences in a row. But he doesn't quite reach the level of Avraham, or Moshe, who get their name in the same sentence that way, but it is a semblance of that. It's a lesser version of that. Acharei, after, number 2, although he adhered to his father's teachings, after, like before, he did not change his own basic convictions, as shown by the directional shape of the reading mark. So he is going to stand apart from some of those things that his father tried to make him change. Holy dough is producing with a munach. This is separate from what's come from before, but it's going to move us forward into what's going to go after. His producing of a son was not per se a final purpose. He attempted to prepare him for independent living on the basis of past experience in relation to the future, as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. So he's going to separate his son out and give him what he needs to go forward with. Et Peleg, with a katon, with a two-part note on it. While Aver was instructing his son to adapt to the basics of proper living, he expected initiative from his offspring, and together with Peleg they considered suitable approaches to problems and maintained consultations in various questions, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So again, they are working together to try to, both Aver and Peleg, to try to work out the problems of their own time, of their own day, and come to I'm not sure if it's compromises or come to ways to continue on. Nonetheless, we have this two-part thought that's going to go into this grouping of Aver and Peleg.
Maybe that they were partners in solving a question.
So again, where do we get a two-part thought there, other than the fact that they're two separate people?
And equals, as opposed to a parent and a child.
So usually, when you have two things that are one above the other, you are giving one dominance over the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure of the concept of equals. Contributors, yes.
Yeah.
Two
Then-
contributors, with the understanding that Aver, the father, has dominance, and Peleg has a role, but is not an equal per se.
And that fits perfect.
Fair enough. Primacy, not dominance. I agree. I will use my words goodly. Yes.
It's interesting how there's such an emphasis on Aver's role in shaping his children and educating his children, because can you tell us about Yeshiva Shem Aver?
So again, we are saying that the world has influences that we're starting to perhaps drift, and Aver is somebody who stops that drift in its tracks. So that's why he gets that important, Vayechi Aver. So he gets some importance to himself. So he gets the reward for having come back. Whereas why are we saying Shem and Aver, not Shem and our Parshat? Shem and his next son. Again, if we look at our little table here, we're going to notice that Shem is living all of this time, but our Parshat is living significantly into Abraham's life, and so I don't see a reason why we need to skip our Parshat and Shelach and go to Aver.
We couldn't fit our Parshat on the sign. There's a lean on the plaque.
So the concept is that what you have is you have intellectual influences on the generation, and specifically with respect to the concept that there is a single all-powerful defining being. They don't necessarily continue to maintain that influence. There are many midrashim about what happens at the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, and I think we're going to finish with this thought. So when Yaakov runs away, he doesn't go directly to Padan Aram. He spends 14 years in Yeshivat Shem and Aver, and there are a lot of questions. What's he doing there? What's he learning there? And if he was learning the fact that there is a single influential God, then why is Avraham special? If that thought was still in the world with Shem and Aver, then Avraham becomes no one special. He is not the one who stands Aver. He's not the one who he's not the one who stands against the rest of the world who had a different thought. So the concept of what is taught in Yeshiva Shem and Aver seems to be the power and influence of each of the other lesser elements that influence the world. So the ability to read in the stars and in nature the forces and power that allow things to be the way that they are. So more the concept of science and nature, the way that the world keeps on spinning, and the way that if you knew this, then you could predict that, and this ties into that, which ties into that, which ties into that. That's what you learn at the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. You learn all of the lesser powers, and you'll notice throughout Torah that false gods and idols are called Elohim. They are given a name that we ascribe to God because they do have influence and power, but they are not the direct source. They are a perversion of not being able to look around the corner and see what caused that. You stop at the wrong spot. Nonetheless, they have influence and power, and that's what you learn at the Yeshiva of Shem and Aver. You learn of these items of influence and power, and you don't ask that last question, well, what made them, how do they come about, how do they get their power in the first place?
So
you stop there.
they would be learning that they are powerful, not that
They would be learning
We
to
be
predict,
very
to
influential
predict,
to
to
us.
predict, to predict their ways,
Okay.
and to use that knowledge
Maybe that's
without necessarily ascribing divinity to it. It's not a question that they were idol worshippers, but they say that this causes that. This is important because of that. So it is a pure definition of nature or science or whatever you want to call it. That's what you learn in Yeshiva Shemin.
Maybe that's where Yaakov learned Mendelian genetics.
And how to be a dead eye, spitball in a shop.
Yeah.
You know,
Hard work, right?
it's analogous to the very complicated celestial machinery that people were taught before they understood that the Earth was not the center of the universe.
So we know that Avram had this knowledge as well. I'm gonna close with one more thought. So Avram was told by God that he's going to have many children, and Avram looks to the stars and uses the knowledge that he learned from the concepts of Shem and Aver to be able to predict the future. So the panacea of science is this theory of everything. That if you could define particle physics enough, you would be able to, if you had enough computer power and enough time, to use that formula to predict exactly everything that's going to go on, because you can add in all of the influences and you can turn it into equations. So that's what the power of the yeshiva of Shem and Aver is. You can look at literally the nature of the way that things are and see what's going to come out of that. So Avram looks into the stars, looks at the name Avram, and realizes Avram is someone who is going to not have children. And yet God tells him he is going to have children. And what's the sentence say? V'hamin b'Hashem. He believed in God. V'yachashva lo tzedakah. And God thought it was a charity for him. What's a charity? It's something that is going to give you extra merit, despite the fact that because you need it. It's going to give him something that he's going to be able to exceed the system. He's going to go beyond the rules of nature and get things that are from the world that is beyond. And that is the power of Abraham, that he is Av Hamon Goyim. He's going to be somebody who's beyond, who is going to have lots of children. And Avram sees no way that he can have lots of children, and yet is told that he can exceed what the system of nature that he's learned all of his life is. God says so. It can be that way. We're going to turn off the
Thank you so much. Good.